So first, thank you. Can you all hear me? Okay. Thank you, Reggie, for those incredible introductions. And so this panel, Our Stories to Tell, Black Authors Reflect on the Art of Writing, will be exploring their respective career journeys and inspirations that fed their lives. And so we're going to start with just a short reading by each of the writers, just so you can get a flavor for their work if you don't already have one. So go ahead, Maisy. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So they'll read either their work or work that inspired them.
Okay. Yeah, so my novel is called These Ghosts Are Family, but I feel like I've read it all over town by now. So Naomi gave us the option of reading a work by a Black writer who inspired us. And when I was in college, I read Good Woman. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Oh, some people in the back. Oh, yeah. Is that better? Yeah. Okay, sorry. So I read Good Woman by Lucille Clifton, and it's a collection of poetry, but it also at the end includes a memoir called Generations. And it's very short, very fragmented, and she kind of traces her family lineage leading up to her great-great-grandmother, who they called Mammy Caroline, who was able to actually recall the Middle Passage. She remembers, the legend is that she remembers being captured in Africa, and that she was part of the Dahomey tribe, and that she was brought over at the age of 8 to be enslaved. And so she tells each of her family members' stories very briefly, from herself to her grandmother Caroline. And my kind of work is very inspired by it because even though it's built a lot on family legend, and she was the first person who kind of showed me how empowering that you need to make it legitimate to, the wider world. So I'm just going to read like 2 pages. And she also tells the story. I mean, she mixes like humor with tragedy a lot, which is something that I try to do with my work. She tells a story about her great-grandmother who was hung in the state of Virginia for shooting a white man, but it's done in a way that it somehow becomes empowering as well. Harvey Nichols was a white man, my daddy would say, who come south after the war to make money. He brought his wife and family down and bought himself a house and everything. And it was close to the Sale place, and all the slaves so their last name is Sale, so just so it doesn't get confused. And it was close to the Sale place, and all the slaves had stayed there after emancipation because they said the Sales was good people. But they had just changed their last name to Sale, S-A-Y-L-E, so people would know the difference. And this Harvey Nichols saw Lucy and wanted her. And I say she must have wanted him too, because I told you, Lou, she was mean and didn't do nothing she didn't want to do, and nobody could force her because she was Mammy Caroline's child. And everybody around there respected Mammy Caroline so much. And her daughter, Lucy, had this baby boy by this Connecticut Yankee named my daddy, Lou, your own grandfather and Mammy Caroline's grandson. But oh, Lou, he was born with a withered arm. Yes, Lord, he was born with a withered arm, and when he was still just a baby, Lucy waited by the crossroad one night for Harvey Nichols to come to her, and when he rode up on a white horse, she cocked up a rifle she had stole and shot him off his horse and killed him. And she didn't run away. She waited right there by the body with the rifle in her hand till the horse coming back empty saddled to the stable brought a mob to see what had become of Harvey Nichols. And when they got to the crossroad, they found Lucy standing there with the rifle in her hand. And they didn't lynch her, Lou, because she was Mammy Caroline's child, and from Dahomey women. That's what I believe. Mammy Caroline got one of the lawyer Sale family to defend her daughter, because they was all lawyers and preachers in that family. They had a legal trial, and Lucy was found guilty and hanged. Mammy Caroline took the baby boy, Jeannie, and raised him. Forget who he was. I used to ask her sometimes, Mammy, was you scared back then about Grandma Lucy? And she would look at me, right at me, and say, I'm scared for you, mister, that's all. She's always called me Mr. She said I was Mr. Sale, and Lou I always was. And Lucy was hanged. The lady whose name they gave me like a gift had her neck pulled up by a rope until the neck broke, and I can see Mammy Caroline standing straight in Green, Virginia, apart from the crowd of silent black folk and white folk watching them, and not the wooden frame swinging her child, and their shame making distance between them and her a real thing. And I know she made no sound, but her mind closed around that picture like a frame, and I know that her child made no sound, and I turn in my chair and arch my back and make this sound for my two mothers and for all Dahomey women. Later, I would ask my father for proof. Where are the records, Daddy? I would ask. The time may not be right, and it may just be a family legend or something. Somebody somewhere knows, he would say, and I would be dissatisfied and fuss with Fred about fact and proof and history until he told me one day not to worry, that even the lies are true. In history, even the lies are true. And there would be days when we young Sales would be trying to dance and sing in the house, and Sammy would miss a step and not be able to keep up to the music, and he would look over in the corner of the room and holler, "Damn Harvey Nichols," and he would laugh.
Good evening, everybody. It is so great to be here because I grew up in Essex County, right next to Newark. And I actually used to come to this library many, many years ago to do research on my family, genealogical research. So my book, Coleman Hill, is actually inspired by my family, which they are from Alabama and Florida, up out of slavery. And they settled in Vauxhall. Does anyone know Vauxhall here? Yes, Jersey folks, yes. But most people obviously outside of Jersey and Northern Jersey probably have never even heard of it and can't even pronounce it. So it's really exciting to be here with a Jersey audience. And I'm actually going to read an excerpt that is inspired by her journey. She has a tragic story where she got kicked out of the house by her mother-in-law who hated her. And the book explores, potential reasons why she hated her. And this was my imagining of her journey in between, because no one actually knew what happened to her after she got kicked out. So I had to invent it, and I have her coming to Newark. So I figured I would read that section from the book. Bertha walks the bustling streets of downtown Newark looking for a paper boy. And sorry, this is set in, the book takes place from 1916 to the 80s. And this particular section is set in circa 1943. Bertha walks the bustling streets of downtown Newark looking for a paper boy. She finds several clustered on Market Street outside Bamberger's. She buys a Star Ledger and continues down the block, pretending to sniffle into her handkerchief to hide her swollen face. But those elegant white shoppers all around seem not to see her. If she doesn't step aside in time, they would mow her down, the edges of their purses and shopping bags slicing at her arms and thighs. Soon, little daylight will remain. Desperation gnaws at her like fingers at her pockets. Unable to stand the maneuvering through the crowds any longer, Bertha ducks down a quiet side street. She rests against a lamppost and opens a newspaper. The housing section, even if she had the strength to confront her mother-in-law, Celia, and claim the children that very day, they would all be homeless. It would take weeks to save enough for a place for herself alone, let alone the 6 of them. There are many ads for living domestics, but Bertha skips them. And her mother always said she'd sell her house before seeing her daughters do it. Bertha's mother no longer cares for Bertha's welfare, of course, but even if Bertha wanted to take that kind of work, she has no official experience, no references. Day work would be easier to acquire, but who would hire her with that worn face? Then there are the shoes pinching her feet, her rumbling stomach, and the pain increasing in her female parts. She turns another corner and sees a church and thinks that, at the very least, she could rest there for a while. By the time she reaches the top of its wide flight of stairs, she's gasping. She tugs on the giant red door, but it doesn't budge. Prepared to sob in public, she turns to sit on the stairs when a colored woman approaches her. She's petite like Celia, but as dark as Bertha. She also looks as glamorous as any white Hollywood actress, with her tailored suit dress, diamond jewelry, and shiny makeup. "Sister, the lion is over there," she says. Bertha glances alongside the church and sees people waiting. The woman introduces herself as Gladys, telling Bertha food is being served. Bertha frowns. "Is that Father Divine business? I don't believe in all that." A few of her co-workers from the button factory had followed for that man, whose churches were spreading all over the country, according to the Negro newspapers. Her co-workers ate free meals he served and kept encouraging Bertha to join them so she could save her lunch money. The more they ate, though, the more they seemed convinced that some regular old Negro like him was their ticket to heaven. Gladys smiles and nods. "Yes." As Bertha stands there contemplating, her stomach growls loud enough for Gladys to hear. Gladys covers her mouth and giggles into her glove. Bertha sucks her teeth, deciding to risk being brainwashed by some man who calls himself God. Gladys links her arm through Bertha's and leads her down the stairs. When Gladys inquires about Bertha's face, she feels dumb for what crosses her lips. "I tripped and fell." She cringes, anticipating disbelief, but Gladys merely asks if she has someplace to stay. Bertha looks down and shakes her head. Gladys volunteers a room right there in Newark, as well as a job that covers rent, and Bertha can't believe her. It's live-in domestic work, but the pay is more than what her sister Nell brings home from her newspaper factory job. "Where I live," Gladys says, "is a little peculiar, but if you don't mind, we'd be glad to have you. We've been looking for somebody for a while now." As Bertha gets her dinner of ham, sweet potatoes, and creamed spinach, with a few other women, they have another opportunity if Bertha is interested, she says, but it's best to explain once they're there. A short bus ride later, Bertha understands why.
First of all, it's really a pleasure to be here again and to be with everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Excuse this frog in my throat. I have this terrible cold getting over. Basically, I was too lazy to go through many books and things that influenced me in the 70 and mid-70 years that I've been here, and also at least the 60 I've been writing. But I did think what I would do would just to kind of go through writers that I enjoy, that influenced me. In poetry, Lucille Clifton, I was delighted to see the book that you have of her poetry. Mysteries, Barbara Neely, Louise Penny, Walter Mosley, Toni Morrison, of course, in everything. Speculative fiction, Octavia Butler. And in terms of a general reminder of what to do and not to do, as a writer, I always enjoy reading Stephen King's On Writing, which is a good book. I've begun a new mystery series that takes place during the Harlem Renaissance, and I've been reading work during that period of The Big C by Langston Hughes, Rudolph Fisher's The Conjure Man Dies, and some of the poetry prose in The New Negro, edited by Adam Locke, and which my protagonist is inspired. Music is always essential to me when I write. I listen to my playlists where anything can pop up, from Mahalia Jackson to Lee Morgan to Nocturnes by Chopin, Tammy Terrell, and Marvin Gaye. And so this is what inspires me, literally everything. Have to keep your eyes open and just take it all in and hope that something will come out. I'm really impressed by these writers. It's always amazing to hear such incredibly young talent. Thank you both for sharing, not being as lazy as me, and sharing your work and your books.
So I have, yes, please. So I should mention there's going to be time for Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, just keep those in mind. So I want to start with, there's so much to ask, especially with what you've read, and the Lucille Clifton, brought so much to mind around record keeping and history. But I want to start with just talking about words and how and when you fell in love with them. If you would even describe it in that way, if there's a memory or a moment that comes to mind.
The oldest person on the panel. I've always loved to write, first of all. If you have a kid who makes up stories and makes plays with dolls and whatnot, you've got a writer underneath. From the time I was like 6, everything that, it's always been a part of who I am. I really can't imagine living without writing. It's essential. It's essential to me. And really, I think, more than anything else, just the craft. And that's what I do. First words, goodness, how long ago? 60 years or 70. But just, it always feeds me. So it's always been a part of me, writing and listening and reading.
I have to say the same. I wrote my first story when I was about 7 years old. And I grew up with my mother, who's in the audience tonight. She would read stories to my brother and me, always reading books. We always had books in the house. My brother and I would create little stories, like you said, with dolls, and we would make little drawings and create little stories around them. So that was the beginning. And my family also, my mother and her people were storytellers. So they would tell, and that's how this book came about, me listening to my relatives tell these stories about their lives in the 1940s, which was so different from my life in the 1980s, and I just imagination, so I could visualize things, and then I just put words to paper one day and it never stopped.
I've been a big reader since I was very young, and I was thinking the part of that reason is because when I came to America as a child, and I remember my teachers telling my parents that I had to be in the remedial class for a couple of years because they thought that I would be behind because I was new, but Jamaican people speak English. It didn't really make any sense. But so my parents were very paranoid about me and my brother falling behind, so they would always take us to the library. They would buy us, they couldn't buy us reading. If I was reading, I kind of avoid doing work and do other things. So I was always reading when I was young. But I didn't start writing till I was probably 16. I think I was in 10th grade in high school, and my teacher had us read the short story by Flannery O'Connor. It's called Everything That Rises Must Converge. And it's about a white son and mother who have this contentious relationship, and it's during the bus boycotts. And so they take a bus, I think they take a bus together, but there is a black woman on the bus, and they kind of play this game with her. And so our teacher gave us an assignment to write the story over from the point of view of a character who doesn't speak. And so I wrote it from the black woman in the story. And I got an A+. And so, that was the most kind of encouragement I've ever had for producing creative work. And I kind of decided I wanted to be a writer after that.
So family and familial ties or even kind of intimate relations, and thinking, in some of your work, Valerie, comes up. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the ways in which family, both thematically and your actual family, has shaped your work.
Well, excuse me. I'm not sure exactly in terms of.
Well, you can start with
family or parents or grandparents.
One of the things that I thought about with this question is the dedication or the acknowledgments in your work, and and just thinking, almost all of you thank family, and family comes up in the writing too.
It influences everything. Your family is is who you are to a large extent. And certainly my husband, I'm married to a writer for the last 40 years. And I think 50 years maybe. And I think that my daughters are, I think, older than you two. And you kind of learn from each other. I think in terms of just listening to what the two of you have read and you're going about your book, it's probably much more kind of essential to what you're writing than mine. I write mysteries.
But there's intimate relations, right? There's people having relations with each other.
But you observe. Yeah, you observe more than anything else. It's not like, I mean, I don't put my family into my books at all. I wouldn't dare. And I know one book I wrote that was kind of racy, I guess you could say. I wrote it all. I think it was but my husband is more disturbing. But it comes into, everything you do, every person you meet to a certain extent does come into your work. Sitting here in this hall, I see certain things that ways people talk, certain things that they've said. So everything, as a writer for me, everything influences me. Family is essential. Because of my books, you made mention of my dedications to my books. Everyone has a book. My daughters, other than that, I've written a fair number of books. So I don't know. But it's just, it's a way of just acknowledging and saying, thanks for being there for me. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That is pretty much what that is. As a mother, as a grandmother now, of course, with a 16-year-old and observing his world, that too influences me. There's a character in my newest book I've read now, The Mystery, who's 12 years old. And looking at him, and he's 16, but looking at the world, which is so completely different from everything I've been. He was in your 40s, your parents were in their 40s. I was probably your parents' generation. It's like, it's hard sometimes to imagine what, I guess if you're writing about that, what things are like. So that's pretty much it in terms of, they do inspire you, but it's not in the book itself, not in the books.
Well, I dare to write about my family. It wasn't necessarily a choice. My family, like I said, these stories, my life was saturated with these stories, and it actually wasn't hard for me to imagine life in the 40s, even though I didn't live then, because I've always been a really good visualizer. So even though I really didn't know what an icebox looked like until like the late stages of the show, I was like, wait, what does an icebox look like? I didn't know. I was like, oh, that's what it looks like? Oh, really? I hadn't told. But I could visualize, I could see things, I could see people, situations, etc. But this book is not my typical work, because my typical work, it's not even inspired necessarily by my direct life. I don't like to write about. I write a lot about history. My next novel is looking at Ghana and the slave trade, which I had a study abroad experience in Ghana, learned about the little known story of female captives, became interested in that. Write about people who are completely not like me, having to go into the mind of an enslaver who's Dutch, old, male, right? And really get into his shoes and figure out his psyche, all that kind of stuff. But this one, yes, it is dedicated to my family because they are the inspiration. Without them, I could not have written this book. So this is basically this book.
Yeah, my book is definitely not based, it's not necessarily based on my family's experience, but it is inspired by them. And, I think a lot of what inspired me growing up was just sitting and listening to my mother's family just tell like ghost stories constantly. And, thinking about learning how to read them as I grew older and realizing that there is this like kind of truth beneath them, whether or not you believed in the supernatural, like all the stories were revealing something about the climate or the tension in the family at that time. So, I think I began this book by incorporating early stories that I remember from when I lived in Jamaica or when I was a child, and also just like early memories. And yeah, there are characters. I think your family, especially your parents, your grandparents, are the first kind of, they're like enigmas when you're a child. Like they're the first kind of characters that you try to figure out. And I think I was always trying to figure out my father and my grandfather especially, and trying to understand them. And I kind of put some of that that fantasy that you could really know somebody or understand. I do put like my other grandfather who recently died, like I was thinking that he's in this book, and his name is Augustus, and there's a character named Augustus kind of behaving at the end. Like, it's just like a small, like, inside family joke. So yeah, I think my family is all over this.
So, I mean, history has come up, and this is a question I'm really excited to ask. I don't know if you'll be excited to answer it, but I'm curious to know, just as writers, are there questions that you're kind of preoccupied with or sort of obsessed with that you keep returning to over and over again?
But I feel like we actually don't really talk about it enough, because there are other people who get to talk about their tragedies, even tragedies that didn't even happen for as long as, the transatlantic slave trade. But it's something, I say regretfully, because it's not like I intentionally want to put myself through the trauma of writing about slavery. So to me, as long as those ramifications are still present, I still want to be talking about it. Case in point, so I said my next novel is looking at the Gone in the slave trade. I've actually been working on it for like 20 plus years. Not, again, really by choice. But my next novel that I started after that was set in the future. And, it's the future, and it's kind of like in the United States, but it's post-United States. And I was like, oh, this is cool, I get to write about something different. And I was like, oh, actually not write about slavery all over again, because it's looking at people who are like imprisoned, so it's kind of looking at the prison industrial complex, but it's like, I was like, I can't escape this and write about slavery again. Mm-hmm. But I totally want to write something slapstick. I'm also, I love humor, I love making people laugh. And so I do have a slapstick novel in me, but I feel like I have to get through, the heavy historical stuff, and then I can just be fun and silly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just piggybacking off that. I think, a lot of my writing ends up kind of exploring how the interconnections between Caribbean and American history, and also, just like how far is too far back, I guess, is a question I keep thinking about. In a similar way, like I'm writing a novel set in the present, set in Florida, focused on like working class Jamaican women working there, but then I end up having to look at like the history of, migrant labor and like cane cutters and, plantation work, and it, a lot of history creeps in even when you don't necessarily mean it to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, everything I've written is so different. I mean, the mysteries are one type, the paranormal romances or something quite different, the children's books are a world of their own. So I don't really come back to one particular theme. I just, the characters will lead me in different places, and that's what's wild for me. I'm working now, as I mentioned, I have a new series I'm working on that takes place during the Harlem Renaissance, 1926 it begins. And, kind of expanding this whole mind to take in new things. But I think that as a mystery writer, you're dealing with crime, you're dealing with justice, and I think that's one thing that does come through in all novels, is evil, understanding the nature of evil. That's a sad thing that happens when you're coming up with these characters who are actually killers and that kind of stuff. We're talking about unpleasant subjects, but that's, I guess that would be a part of it too, is understanding what makes people do this. And understanding the limitations of goodness and how you can be good in such a world. I suppose that would be it. As I think about what I've written, it always seems to come back to that.
Is there something political? Is there something that you're trying to resolve in your return to these topics, be it slavery or crime or,
I've just been around long enough to know there are no easy answers to anything. I mean, it's just the world is at this point. The older you get, I will speak for myself, the more you understand that there's nothing simple about life. It's far more complex than you think it's going to be. And in some ways, when you explore that in a novel, and the characters begin to talk and take on their own lives, and they do, incidentally, it gives you a deeper sense of appreciation for people. and a sorrow that comes with that as well. But one thing about writing a mystery, or the kind of books that I write, and I write genre fiction, is it always turns out right. You can always catch the bad guy in the end.
Right.
And that's, of course, not what happens in life. And never, rarely. And that is a certain kind of satisfaction that comes with that, which is why I guess that mysteries and those kinds of things, cozy mysteries, whatever mystery read, are so, they sell so well. People like a resolution, and of course, I like the result.
My writing centers Black people, and for the most part, Black women, and that in and of itself, I think, is a political act, because they're not the people that, whose stories are valued by the mainstream people. We have people who don't want race to be taught. We have people who are denying that this country is racist, has been racist. So I think to explore these stories, I mean, it's all political.
Yeah, I think a big part of what I wanted to highlight in my book, or what I was thinking about, was just how, there are ways of thinking that are so ingrained, especially in Jamaican culture, that nobody is aware of it. And I think part of what I wanted to point out was like how white supremacy works in a place where there aren't that many white people or any white people, and how how this colonial kind of mindset and these values are so ingrained that we're not aware that we're doing it, and we're not aware that we're kind of disavowing our own actual history, because we're so proud of it, and we're taught to be proud of it. We're taught to symbolically, if not literally.
I'm going to kind of return to questions of sort of trajectory. I want to ask, so the leap or the transition between, right, we started with talking kind of about how you got into writing. And there's a difference in writing can be very satisfying to do, whether you share it or not, just as a private act. But that transition towards making your writing available, making it public. Can you talk a little bit about that transition for you? In particular, I'm thinking about things like particular steps you took, but also how you worked through potentially feelings like fear, because I hear that come up a lot with writers who are, aspiring and want to put their work out into the world, that this issue of fear. Whoever.
I could go.
Go ahead.
I could go
Please.
So just kind of how we learned how to kind of share. After I decided that I wanted to be a writer, I kind of, that's a goal I was working towards from high school, really. And I decided to get like an MFA after college. And I think I thought that was kind of the end of the journey, because I thought, you tend to think you go to these programs and you get an agent and all these things happen. But that's not really, and that you learn.
Get famous overnight?
Yeah, that you learn. But I think, there's like a cliche, I feel like, that people say about getting published, is that you have to send your work out and collect rejections. And I actually, when I started doing that, that was a big leap for me. My first short story, I think I got it took me 2 years to get it published, and I think I got over 88 rejections. And there was something to be said about inoculating yourself against that kind of rejection, because you also learn, after a while, sometimes something is so close, and by sending it out, eventually you can start to see it differently and see what you're missing or what needs to be changed about it. So there are a lot of different ways, and also outside of the institutions, just meeting other writers, forming a writing group. I had a consistent writing group for 6 years outside of my MFA, and that really kind of encouraged me.
And did that help with combating any fear, if that was there to begin with?
I think you've got to learn to just live with that because I don't think that ever goes away. I don't think like doubt and fear ever go away. I think somebody asked me that too. It's just, I think after a while it just, you kind of decide that this is something that I'm going to do because I have to do it. And I think the path for my book being published was very like lucky for me. But I had already decided that whatever the path was, I was going to continue it, go down that journey, whether it was like a big publisher or a little publisher, small press, or, I would just keep submitting.
Tenacity.
Yeah.
Fear was actually never a factor for me. My very first story that I wrote when I was 7, I wrote it because I wanted attention, and I got it. My brother was the family writer, being 1 year older than me at 8-ish. And my mother had a friend over, and I wanted to tell her something, and she wouldn't listen to me because she was reading one of my brother's little stories. And I was like, I can do that too. So I went to the bedroom and I wrote me a little story. And I was very into details. That's for another day. There's a story there too. But then when I showed her the story, all the attention was on me. And I used to write little stories, and I used to take it to my elementary school. At the lunch table, I'd be passing out little drawings, and people were like, oh yeah. So for me, it was just like, I wanted to be the youngest person to publish a book in this country. When I was 12 years old, I sent a cover letter to a publisher, to Scholastic. Oh, you did? Maybe you. So I wrote this letter to Scholastic, and I was like, here's my book. And it's about, I didn't know what a quarter letter was. It was on yellow legal paper, long hands. I was like, this is my book. I want you to publish my book. I actually got a response from the editor at Scholastic. And they were like, we're not going to publish your book, but don't stop writing. And I didn't stop writing. And I still wanted to be the youngest person. But then when I was like 15, I was like, she took that away from me. And then at some point I thought I was going to be the oldest person to publish a book. Because I'm a little older than I live. Because black don't crack. But then I learned that there was someone like 90 who published a book, and I was like, oh God, I hope it doesn't take that long. But so fear wasn't really a factor for me. But I would say because this book is inspired by my family, I'm using some of the facts. Family's on the cover. Family's on the spine. And there's pictures of my family inside the book. I would say that I had to think a lot of things like thinking about ethics of publishing, my family's personal stories and their traumas and, secrets and all that kind of stuff. So if there's any fear, I think it was around that, like how my family would receive me. They're here in the audience, so obviously I have not been disowned yet. I don't know if they finished the book, but so there was some fear about how it would be received by my family, how other people would also receive. The thing is, there are a lot of people in my family who've been demonized, and villainized, and I think I actually humanized them in the book, and readers have been telling me that. Oh yeah, I wanted to hate this character, I wanted to hate that one, but I couldn't because you show them in such complex ways, so in that sense I feel like I did a really good job.
Before we go to Valerie, for sort of aspiring writers, do you have any advice with fear? I mean, it's a question I hear all the time, so I thought I would.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
No, I think you just have to
go ahead.
Oh,
before we get to Valerie. Because I know, Kim, you didn't have any fear.
To write. I also, I'm sorry. No, you just have to write, and not, like you're saying, don't be afraid to send it out. No one's going to come to your door and knock and say, give me that story you wrote. Because the reality is, you have to take a chance. And again, the bottom line is to write because you love to write. Because you just love to write. And hopefully, I was lucky, I was in Essence at the time that I sold my first book. And at that point, they didn't think black people read. It's amazing, but that's what they thought. And so unless you were Toni Morrison or James Baldwin, they didn't publish it. And then Terry McMillan had a bestseller. Walter Mosley had a bestseller. And suddenly they came to Essex, knocking on our door. Any writers here? And everybody got a book to go listed. And I think that it's the market sometimes, but you can't depend upon the market to justify your talent or your work or your love of the work. You simply have to go forward with it. Fear, yeah, I mean, I think about you and your family. You don't want your family to, which is why I don't put them in my books, But I do, but they don't know they're in there. So that's the reality. But you just have to get outside of that and just go forward with it. I look back at, the types of books I've written, and I sometimes think, I don't remember writing this. Gee, I wrote this 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And then that kind of gives you the courage too to go forward. I wrote that then, I can do it again. And it's scary to write. It's scary to write. That's the reality. I sit down at my desk in the morning, not the morning, early afternoon in my case. And is this any good? You don't know. But you have to go forward with it anyway. And and I have written a fair number of books, but it's always scary to start a new one. But you just say, well, here it is. All I can do is the best I can do. And just hope that a reader will love it and get something from it. And for me, that's the best thing. And when a reader says, that really touched me, it's for you all too, I'm sure. I know, thank you for writing that made me feel good. Because I've been through that. And that's all that really counts. I hope that's helpful.
I was just going to ask if you
had
had
a lot of wisdom here, ladies. I'm trying my best.
What's the second part?
I was just going to ask, I know you didn't have any fear, but do you have any quick advice for those who are fearful?
Yeah, the same thing that Valerie said. You have to believe in your writing, you have to believe in your stories, yourself, your capability, because it was not easy to get published. I got lots of rejections along the way. It took me like 15 plus years to get an agent, publishing deal, et cetera, et cetera. This is my third manuscript since my MFA, which is the Master's in Fine Arts and Creative Writing, which I got way back in 2005. And my second, like I said, that's slated to be published is actually the book that I've been writing for like 20 plus years. So all that time, why have I been working on a book for 20 years? I swear. But because I believe in that story, and even though, yes, the fear does come in for the getting to the page, and you're like, oh God, this writing sucks. I believe in that story. That story has been with me for 20 plus years, and that's why I am still writing it and did not give up on my journey to publish it.
Thanks. So I'm going to ask one more question that's sort of related to some of what we've been talking about and what Valerie and I were talking about previously. Do you think the politics of so this is for the Black Authors panel, but we're all Black women here. And I just wanted to ask, do you think the politics of the literary world have at all affected your trajectory as writers, getting your work published? And so I see a nod, and do you want to start us off, Campbell?
It's changed. Publishing has changed so much since I published my first book. It was in 1995. It really has. The publishers have eaten each other up. They're just, it's very hard to get published. It's very hard to get published. And literary writers, these things are what we call literary writers. In the sense that they really are. I'm a genre writer. I write for entertainment.
And we can complicate those categories too, right? Literary.
I don't have an MFA. I just write. But there's nothing better to do with it. But I think that, it's changed. It's changed from that again. So many years ago. It's gotten harder. I think there's more politics. I see no problem with self-publishing, frankly. I think that's fine for, if you want your book to be out there. I had thought when I had written, the 8th book of my Tamara Hale series, and nobody wanted to buy it. I said, well, I'll just publish it myself. But then someone bought a new series for me, and they said, you can't publish anything unless it's, that's the politics of that. I just think you need to, know that it's a hard, kind of a hard road to climb or walk on. But you just can't let that get in your way of the vision that you have for yourself as a writer or creative person.
Something that you said earlier, Valerie, though, stood out to me when you said about when you worked at Essence, and they didn't think that Black people read books. I feel like that's the big change that I've seen. Because obviously when I started my MFA, it was around when Kim did too. So almost 20 years ago. And I think in that time I've seen that publishing kind of, at least for literary fiction, change a bit in that they're recognizing more and more of Black readership. And it's not, through their own altruism. I think, there are a lot of groups and organizations like Well-Read Black Girl, the Brooklyn Caribbean Literary Festival. There are a lot of like self-promotion, like within our communities, we've been doing a lot of groundwork to kind of bring, bring awareness of like that we read books and we buy books. So I do think my personal journey, if I tried to publish this book right when I finished my MFA, I would have had a lot more difficulty. I think people might have said, a lot of it is written in Jamaican dialect or vernacular. They would have said, tone it down. But I think because of the point where I sold it, I think it just made things a lot easier for me.
I think you're right. It's good.
I'm going to say a resounding yes. As you mentioned, Tara McMillan, I think she opened the floodgates. I call them the Sister Girl novels of the 90s. Because, that's what I used to hear, because I was writing myself in the 90s and hearing that, the publishers don't think Black people read, right? Black people do read, but they're reading all of the stuff, with characters who didn't look like them. And so, of course, when there's a character who represents them, they're going to open the floodgates and follow that person, right? And so then after that, around the time that I was getting my MFA, I think that it had already shifted to like the urban fiction trend. So the publishers, they kind of like get fixated on these trends because it is a capitalist enterprise. It's all about what makes money. And sometimes they have no idea what's going to make money. They had no idea that Harry Potter was going to be as big as it was, right? And so after Harry Potter, you see all the fantasy wizard, what I've been writing has been like impacted by a lot of these trends because, so when I was trying to put out literary books, and it's like, well, if you're not writing about the urban life, the gritty urban life, then we don't want to publish you. Right? Who's Nigerian American, publishes her book, and the publishing agent is like, oh, there's African people in this country, and they read too? And so then you see a whole flood of writing by first, second generation African writers. At that time, I was writing a book set in Ghana. But I'm not African. I'm just born playing on African American. I get playing some exotic, whatever. And nothing against the authors themselves. This is again when these publishers, the gatekeepers, change my name to like some African sounding or African name, drop Chinua Achebe in the bio. Like, I was the like neighbor, the cousin, and the uncle, and the sister of Chinua Achebe. And they're like, oh my God, Chinua Achebe, we gotta go with your book. Oh my God. And then this gets published summer of George Floyd, because this is talking about African American history. Before that, wasn't nobody interested in African American history, right? Or you didn't see this flood of books about African American history. And I actually thank George Floyd in my acknowledgments because I recognized that. Because now all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, there's racism in this country.
Yeah, 2020 did
what
a thing.
What is the Black experience like? So then you see this kind of swarm of books, investigating African American history. And it's not to say that my publisher is disingenuous, because I believe that they are really committed to what I'm doing. But even sometimes realizing that the publishing professionals themselves are stymied, right? Because there might be works that they see for years. It's like, oh, I really want to publish this, but maybe also with the marketing, we don't know how to put this out so that people will latch on to this and support it and buy it.
They don't know our market. That's the reality. They don't know us. There are so few Black editors in publishing. I mean, an amazingly small number. Well, it pays better than one thing. Editors in publishing houses. You have to have a trust fund to be able to live on what they pay. And it's, which means that cuts a lot of us out. And that's not about, it's all about money. It's not about the low of the book or even the low of the graph. What is going to make, what's going to be the bottom line? And you're right, there are trends. And I'm not sure what the trend is now. I suppose, I wish I knew, but I'm not sure. And I think, therefore, you just have to go back to yourself and your own spirit and your own center.
The trend now, I think we're still in the African American trend, but Ukraine is popular. And why?
Ukraine? You said Ukraine.
Ukraine is popular. I mean, I have a friend who's Ukrainian, and she was working on a translation project, and when it said she works, she really loves like these turn of the century Ukrainian writers, and they didn't know what I was listening to. Who? What? All of a sudden. Oh, Russia attacks Ukraine. I was like, oh, what's Ukraine? What's the history? Why is this happening? And I was like, oh, I don't mean to be insensitive to my friend, but I think you might now get that publishing deal. And guess what?
It's a business.
Maisy, did you want to? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because, something people have to remember because there are, I did have the good fortune of talking to several Black editors about my book, and who eventually acquired it was a Black editor, but I know there were situations where there were editors who couldn't, who wanted it but couldn't, because publishing is a hierarchy and they have to get permission from the people above them. So rejection doesn't always mean that there wasn't anybody in the house or, in the publisher or in the magazine or the journal who didn't like it, but, a lot of these things are hierarchy, and they have to kind of explain the bottom line and like how this is going to make them money or they won't get permission. So that's the unfortunate part.
So I want to open it up for questions. I have more questions to ask you, but does anyone have any questions? Burning questions to ask the authors? Yes, go ahead.
What the goal would be to get a book published, let's say, about real current events such as, how do you say it, conspiracy theorist situations, spirituality, and all of this other, new wave type thinking. And all that. How difficult it would be to get that published because a lot of people really don't want to hear it.
I mean, publishing is like there's many ways to get published. There's many presses that specialize in specific subjects and topics. I think getting published too is like really about doing research and figuring out the best place to send your work,
That's great.
See who's published the book that you want to write. And then you read see who's publishing the kind of books you want to write. What kind of book, what publisher is publishing these kinds of books. That's one way. It's, again, some research on your part.
And I would say it's also about holding your craft as best as you can,
That's it.
and then just keep putting your work out there because, I'm not one, there are some people who write to the market or who try to write for the market, but I'm not one of those. I really don't care what the market's saying because, again, you have all these kind of outliers that all of a sudden no one expected this to do anything, and all of a sudden people actually wanted to read that book.
Crapshoot.
Open up. I just wanted to quickly divert your attention as well as to our author's source of knowledge is here in the back. So I want to save some time for anybody to support the great work that our panel is doing. And also, I think actually I have a question. So we might make room for one more afterwards to give people time to come back and support. But I would like to ask Valerie, just any, you do these mystery novels, there's also children's novels, so just in particular similarities, one feel more difficult than the other.
For me, once I get into a book, I just love that book. scarcely read the other books that I read. I guess that may be a little weird, but when I'm writing for children, I love writing children's books. I love my Willoughby series. I loved writing those books because they brought back my children who are now in their 50s. And, you know, to living them, seeing them as little girls. I loved writing the paranormal. It was kind of scary to write the paranormal romances. I felt like I had to burn and something to, like, what do you burn when you want to get rid of bad spirits?
Sage.
Sage, thank you. I burned some sage. Really, I'm serious. This is a creepy thing to write about. You know, it really was. Going into that world. If you ever go on, or when you go on to investigate all the things about demons and angels and all that, it's like, oh my God. But when I was writing those, I had a lot of fun writing those books. Those two I wrote. And for the Chamber of Hales, you know, again, living her life. I'm not a single mom. I don't like guns. I don't know how to shoot a gun. All the stuff that she was, tough, you know, sister who grew up, you know, in the Hayes homes, not me, I'm Connecticut from Army brat. So you go outside of your experience sometimes to write. And, you know, you just write and you kind of inhabit the world that you want to write about. Did I answer your question? Probably not.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kind person.
And I'd like to just maybe make space for one more, if that's from the panelists. Anybody has any questions?
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody.
Hi. Kurt.
My name is Johnny Hannon. I just started writing my own book myself. It's called Still Alive. About my trials and tribulations, the things that I've been through, things that actually just occurred just recently. I never knew the things that I was going through when I started happening now. I'm 34 years old. I'm only 34 years old. Everything that started happening right now been more than everything that ever happened ever in my life. That's why I wanted to start writing my book. The reason why it's called Still Alive, I'm still here. I got a story to tell. People need to hear it. But it's only going to start from the age I'm in now. And I'm going to start from that. Everything that I'm going through right now, in the last 5 years, losing my mother, that was one of the biggest things that changed my life. It changed me. It changed me. It took me to another place. I was working for about 15 years as an assistant manager at Walmart. My mom was only thinking about Walmart. Then I knew about it. I got my own mindset. The reason why I was good at working and being an assistant manager is because I love people. I love everybody. I love all y'all.
What's your question, brother?
Huh?
What's your question?
What's my question?
Yeah.
What's your question, bro?
I want to stand on who I am.
Can I ask, do the panelists want to offer any advice for, what's your name?
My name is Johnny Hampton.
For Johnny Hannon in his journey as a writer.
I think you should just write a journal. Keep a journal of your thoughts. Write it every day. And sometimes writing a journal is helpful. A journal is simply every day. Write things that have touched you. And just keep it day by day. And writing can be its own healing. And it sounds to me that's what you're striving for. Is to heal a part of yourself.
Exactly right.
To heal yourself and writing can heal.
That's great.
Exactly right. 100% right.
Do you want to add anything else? Kim or Maisy?
I would second that. Like you said, your story is important.
Yeah.
Because everybody's stories are important. We can learn something from everybody's lives. So keep writing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is where I like to